Good afternoon, and thank you for finding time to be with me this afternoon. The show is Diaspora Dispatches, where I get to bring you up to date with the latest news from across the continent of Africa. My name is Mira Mogutu. Very good morning, good evening, depending on where you tuned in and watching us from this afternoon. And we start our news this afternoon from Gambia, where the Gambian government says it is ready to prosecute former President Yahya Jammeh for what it called the myriad of crimes he committed during his rule. It was responding to a report by the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission, which investigated abuses that took place during his 22 years in power. The former leader has been accused of corruption and serious human rights violations, including killings, disappearances, and imprisonments targeting opponents, journalists, and gay men. Mr. Jammeh came to power in a military coup in 1994 and ruled until 2017. When he went into exile after a shock electoral defeat, the 57-year-old now lives in Equatorial Guinea, which, according to the AFP news agency, has no extradition treaty with the Gambia. And then we head over to Chad, and workers in Chad have begun an indefinite strike to demand the release of 6 opposition leaders arrested during an anti-French march earlier this month. It will affect both public and private sectors, with minimal services being offered in hospitals, a federation of the country's trade unions have said. Those arrested came from Wakit Tama, which is an Arabic means Time's Up, a coalition of civil society groups and opposition parties formed in the wake of the coup that took place following the death of President Idris Deby last year. The coalition has been calling for a boycott of products from France because of the former colonial power's support for the junta led by Deby's son. The Wakit Tama leaders were detained for allegedly destroying property and disturbing public order during the demonstration that took place on the 14th of May. And gunmen have abducted 2 Catholic priests in the northern Nigerian state of Katsina, a region grappling with a wave of kidnappings for ransom by armed gangs. A spokesperson of the Catholic Church, Father Chris Omotosho, told the BBC that the gunmen broke into the priest's residence in the village of Gadima, Maikambu, at around midnight on Tuesday. They kidnapped the clerics together with 2 children. Police say they have deployed officers to try and rescue them. It is not clear who carried out the abductions, but kidnappings for ransom are common in the mainly Muslim north, with thousands of people seized over the past year. And more than 80,000 people have been displaced by clashes in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and they are now in urgent need of food. That is according to the United Nations. Fighting between government soldiers and March 23 movement M23 rebels has intensified in recent weeks in North Kivu province. The clashes spread south early this week to about 20 kilometers from Goma town, the provincial capital. Those displaced have fled to improvised sites, churches and schools. The UN Office for Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, has confirmed that now humanitarian agencies fear the worst for the refugees if the hostilities continue. In a statement on Wednesday, the spokesperson for the province's governor said they were faced with this very worrying situation. And we head over to Tunisia, and the president, Kais Saied, has issued a decree calling voters to a referendum on a new constitution that is slated for the 25th of July. There will be one question on whether people agree with the new constitution, according to an official notice. It comes after he named an advisory committee to draft a new constitution for a new republic amid opposition's call to reverse the move. The country's main political parties say they will boycott a dialogue on the formation of the new constitution and term the presidential action unilateral. Mr. Said has pushed through a series of moves, expanding his powers and dismantling elected institutions since last year when he suspended parliament. And then we head over to the West Africa still, and the presidential palace in Luanda was decked out to receive the president of Senegal, Macky Sall, on day 1 of a 3-day visit. The trip is the first by Senegalese head of state to Angola. The aim of the visit is to boost friendly relations between the two countries following the opening of an Angolan embassy in Dakar. Sall, who is also the acting president of the African Union, was received by his counterpart João Lourenço. The two leaders of state are calling for a reform reform of the United Nations Security Council, which has no African country as a permanent member. Several cooperation agreements were signed with an emphasis on the partnership for oil. Sall also announced that he would follow the Angolan example and open a Senegalese embassy in Luanda. And hundreds of demonstrators from the South African Economic Freedom Fighters Party marched on Wednesday to the French embassy in Pretoria as the continent marked the 59th anniversary of the foundation of the African Organization of African Unity. The protesters demanded that France leave Africa. Dressed in the traditional red t-shirts and capes, the political activists carried placards reading "France must pay reparations for its colonial crimes." The party leader, Julius Malema, urged France to exit the economic, political, and cultural and military affairs of the continent. And then we head over to Niger, where the government said Wednesday that the army have killed around 40 Boko Haram jihadists in overnight fighting on islets in Lake Chad. Some 100 Boko Haram fighters arrived in 4 large wooden canoes and an armed speedboat and attempted to attack troops on the islands of Lake, which borders Niger, Nigeria, Cameroon and Chad. The Defense Ministry said the soldiers forced the assailants to flee with several dead in their ranks. The ministry said a subsequent operation in the area led to the neutralization of some 40 fighters and the recovery of several weapons along with ammunition and explosives. On the army side, 7 soldiers were injured when their vehicle was blown up by an improvised explosive device, the ministry has confirmed. The Lake Chad Basin and its countless small islands has become one of the main havens for jihadists from Nigeria's Boko Haram and its dissident branch, the Islamic State in West African province, otherwise known as ISWAP. And we end the bulletin from Somalia, and the Prime Minister has suspended his Foreign Affairs Minister over allegations that he authorized an illegal shipment of charcoal to Oman. The Somali government banned charcoal exports a decade ago to prevent deforestation and the funding of conflicts. However, analysts say the shipment was not the real reason for the suspension. The suspension of Foreign Affairs Minister Abdisaid Muse is equivalent to a dismissal and came after he authorized a ship to leave Somalia carrying a load of charcoal. The shipment violates Somalia's law preventing charcoal exports, and however, Muse's suspension was long expected because Prime Minister Mohamed Hussein Roble is expected to be replaced by incoming Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud. Isaac Farhan, Deputy Director of Somali Public Agenda, a research group based in Mogadishu, notes that Muse was close to outgoing Somali President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo and had ignored letters from the Prime Minister, including one that fired African Union Special Envoy to Somalia, Francisco Madeira. All right, so that is the latest news from the continent of Africa. And all right, so now the Somali Prime Minister Roble, who should not still be in office right now, because the last time was trying to explain to you the situation and how governance works in Somalia as far as clanism is concerned. Because they come from the same clan with the president, that means they can't hold on, because now the president has been selected or elected, whichever way you want to put it. So that means he has to look for another prime minister from representing another clan, and they do this as they try to be inclusive. So politics and governance in Somalia is a bit intricate. So there's a lot of factors that they look at before they even form government and issue some positions in the government, just to ensure that the whole country is well represented and have representatives even in the top organs of governance in Somalia. But that aside, this foreign minister, I think should be foreign affairs. He is foreign affairs, but foreign minister apparently was very close to the former president, which is expected. He was working under his leadership for quite some time. So it is expected that perhaps he still had some form of allegiance to the former President Farmajo, and hopefully, well, it is expected that when a new president comes in, like now we do have President Mahmoud, then he will have to announce and choose his own ministers. So I don't know why he has not done that yet, but I see that in Kenya. Once a new leadership comes into power, the others, of course, will leave their tenure will end with their president unless the new president decides to keep them or pick them, but I've not seen that happen yet here. So maybe after the August elections, because of the kind of coalitions and agreements we have, maybe some of the ministers who served under President Uhuru Kenyatta might have some lease of life in the same government, because the Jubilee and the opposition are now working together and they form this coalition. But we're not talking about that right now. So I don't know how long it takes for the new government in Somalia to form its own, to put up its own cabinet and appointments, but maybe President Mahmoud will do that soon. So the Foreign Affairs Minister, has been fired. So by Roble, who I don't know why he's still in power. I don't know the process of picking a new prime minister. I thought that the president will just appoint, but I'll look into that and perhaps come back with more information tomorrow. I don't want to give information that I'm not sure of because I don't want to mislead our viewers. But this protest that happened yesterday in South Africa, led by EFF, the Economic Freedom Fighters, the opposition party led by none other than Julius Malema, the firebrand politician from South Africa. So yesterday they were protesting, and they were protesting because they're demanding, remember yesterday was Africa Day, and Africa Day is marked in remembrance every 25th of May every year. The Organization of African Unity, OAU, as it was used to be called until 2002, when it was changed to AU. That organization was formed in 1963 by several key founding fathers in this continent, led by Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, among others, across the continent. And so every 25th of May every year we get to commemorate this day. So it has been called the African Day. So it was celebrated across the continent. But unfortunately, not so many Africans even know that this day exists and the importance of this day. But anyway, the EFF took the opportunity yesterday, while the continent was celebrating the African Day, to go and protest in the French embassy in Pretoria, and they're asking for France to exit Africa. Okay, do I think that is a bit extreme? Yes. But do some of the issues they are raising and the noise they were making perhaps make sense? Absolutely. When you look at a lot of things that are happening in the continent, especially in countries that are former colonies of France, that they're still quite tied. Even their economies, even their countries' national budgets and their currencies are very much still tied to Paris. Then I tell you what, a lot of things Julius Malema was saying and his party, I think it's not the first time that we're hearing it from this continent. The people who have made noise, and France has been called out, and even Emmanuel Macron. I think there was a sitting, I can't remember the exact event, where he had organized, and I think it was an exchange between France and Africa. And a lot of speakers there. I remember one from Kenya, a former. She used to work for a radio station here. I think her name is Adele. And she was saying it's about time, if I can recall very well. But she made her case as far as France's activities in this continent is concerned, that has really not worked for the people in this continent, especially for the France's former colonies, okay? And so what I had President Emmanuel Macron say then, that they have to sit down and relook at how they relook the relationship between France and Africa, especially with its former colonies, and it is time to rework that relationship in a way that it is balanced, in a way that is mutually respectful, in a way that they respect the independence of these countries and theirs, and in a way that is not seen as if France has to keep patronizing its former colonies. I don't know how far it has gone as far as relooking and reworking that relationship, but these are issues that are pertinent. And of course, you can maybe the person who was presenting this, sometimes Julius Malema, he can make good points, but his delivery sometimes can make you dismiss whatever it is that he's saying without even looking too much in what exactly he's saying. So yesterday they marched in the French embassy in Pretoria, and they carried some, placards that others were reading, France must pay reparations for its colonial crimes. I totally believe that. France owes its former colonies. When we just don't have time this afternoon, but when you read through the history of former colonies of France, even up to date, and you see the kind of damage that France has caused in this country, and you see how much these economies, as much as they suffer, and as much as even up to date they have not fully recovered, but the kind of pact they entered and signed when even France was giving them their independence, I'm telling you, the economy of France is carried on the back of these African countries, and that is the truth. And so as we look these relationships between these countries and France, I think it's about time. And, I think it's about time. Unfortunately, the leaders these countries get over there, a lot of times they're gatekeepers. And if one of these countries gets a leader who is not friendly to the French, then somehow there will be a coup, there will be something. They will not last, in power. So you wonder who is doing what. And so some of the leaders who have survived in these countries have been the ones that are regime friendly to France, unfortunately. So they're gatekeepers in a nutshell, and so they will not do much to try to correct some of these things, or to speak out, or to seek out an alliance, based on respect, and based on give and take, and based on interest that serves their countries. They don't do that. They don't do that. So that is the unfortunate part. But, Malema, but him saying that France should fully exit the economic, political, cultural, and military affairs of the continent, maybe that might not happen. Because, like France right now, I think it is the one that put up together the G5 of the Sahel that now Mali moved out of to try and fight the insurgency in the Sahel region. And France is key in that, and it's key in providing that support through its military, through its financial support and everything else that is needed in that area. So that might not be very practical right now, but there are some things that France needs to keep its hands off in these countries, and I think that is a conversation that has to keep going, and maybe one day they'll hear, or maybe one day these countries will actually get leaders who can stand up for their people and demand what's right for their own people, and these reparations, I think it's about time. Okay, it's about time. So anyway, all right. So President Macky Sall visited the president of Senegal, who is the current chairperson of the African Union. He visited Angola, and in his visit, he's visiting Angola for 3 days, and this is the first time that a president from Senegal is visiting Angola in a very long time. And the aim of the visit is to boost friendly relations between the two countries. Now, what struck me while they were issuing a press conference is the two heads of state are calling for reform of the United Nations Security Council, which has no African country as a permanent member. And of course, this is an issue that has been spoken about, but perhaps not loudly enough. And there was someone who was a champion for this. That will be the late Robert Mugabe. He did not mince his words, and hate him or love him. Mugabe was a very principled person. If he believed in something and he stood with it, he will not move him, even if that will mean he loses friendships, alliances, support, or his country will be sanctioned. He didn't care. If he says this is our land and we need it back, then that is it. That is it. So anyway, there's a time at the African Union, he said, it's about time that African Union started negotiating for a permanent position at the United Nations, because it doesn't make sense. Of course, African Union, like now Kenya, has one of the slots for the rotational leadership. Africa usually has, I think, 2 slots for the non-permanent members. You know, the United Nations Security Council is made up of 15 members. So 5 of them are permanent, 10 is non-permanent. So the non-permanent member is rotational. So you're there for 2 years and then it goes to another country. But that is not enough, because any decisions that is made here, unless, and you know, if one member from the one permanent member vetoes that, so whatever it is that you've been doing is useless. So we're just sitting there, especially the rotational, the non-permanent members, as flower girls, really. You know, we're just there for this huge political forum, you know, where these superpowers advance their interest and you know, and geopolitics, and we're just sitting there supporting, and we just sit there like flower girls. And in a continent of over 1 billion people, I think it's about time that Africa had a permanent slot, so that we have an actual voice when it comes to matters, when it comes to agendas, when it comes to things that even affect this continent. Because as it is, it really doesn't matter. That's why you see that a lot of things happening in this continent that should already have attracted, you know, that international platform. Should be something that is spoken about. But because, I don't know, maybe it's just Africa, so nobody really takes it seriously. But when something happens in the West, you see the amount of support, you see the amount of, you know, people, the amount of voices it is attracting, and people speaking, you know, on it. So I think it's about time. It's about time that Africa had a permanent position in the United Nations Security Council, so that we can have an actual power, we can have an actual vote, we can have an actual voice about things that affect us as a continent and about things that are going on in the world. That is how you have a voice. Unless, you know, otherwise we're just sitting there as flower girls, which I don't think is a nice thing. So anyway, something else also to do with Chad as we wind up. Workers there from the workers' union have started, you know, striking, because remember they were earlier in this month they were holding protests, and you know, anti-French protest, and of course they were arrested. The leaders of those protests, they were arrested. So because of that, the workers started their strike yesterday, and this will affect both public and private sectors, with minimal services being offered in hospitals, and Federation of the country's trade union has said. And so this movement, known as Wakit Tama, it's an Arabic word for time is up. And they're saying time is up for Debi's son. Remember President Idris Deby of Chad, who was killed when he went to the front line after he just won an election. He had not even been sworn in. I think he was declared a winner yesterday, and then the next day he went to offer support to his troops who were on, you know, fighting the insurgency. There are some parts in Chad, and he was shot and killed immediately there. And immediately his son was, you know, put as the president, interim president of the Republic of Chad. That is absolutely against the constitution, because the constitution says if the president dies, well, Chad had not had a vice president. I don't know for what reason, but the speaker of the assembly was the one who was supposed to take over, you know, but that was overlooked. And so the son of Idris Deby, who was also an army official, was the one who was put in place. I think his name is it Muhammad? He was put in place as the interim president, and being against the constitution. And President Emmanuel Macron even traveled to be part of that celebration, you know, which I don't know why they support that, because that was against the constitution, and they do stand for the constitution and the rule of law. And when you see other countries like Mali, Burkina Faso and others break that, then it is a problem. But it was never a problem in Chad. So of course the issue of double standard that we've talked even about in this platform now. So all right, so this trade unionists and these opposition leaders, had organized and have been organizing protests, and they're saying enough is enough, and they were calling for Chadians to boycott products from France because of the former colonial power's support to junta Deby. So you don't even hear any talks of elections and when that will be happen and when Deby's son will pass on the baton back to the civilian rule. You don't hear that. And yet France was putting so much pressure to Mali juntas, to Guinea juntas, where also another coup happened, and to others, and saying you have to give us a date when you're going to have an election. And yet in Chad, they're not demanding the same. So that, of course, Mali got very angry with that. So they chased out France, and they severed ties with France, basically. And so these opposition leaders were trying to do the same, but of course they were arrested. And now the people are protesting, and they're saying, could you release our leaders? And also we want France out of this country. So, yeah. That is that, I tell you. All right, thank you so much for watching. This has been Diaspora Dispatches. My name is Miriam Ogoto. It has been a pleasure. I'll see you later. Bye-bye for now.